Alright, for the custom texture that we're going to make, I started with this map here, which I can provide for you. And what we're going to do is, well, I already took the liberty of expanding my canvas out so that I can move over into this area a little bit. You do that by going to Image, Canvas Size, and I'm in Photoshop CS, whatever it is, the latest Photoshop. And what you can do there is do, what I did was go to here, to use that as my anchor point, and say relative, and say, you know, expand 2 inches out that away, like this. Okay, so I just expanded the canvas out. And then from there, I took the image itself and did Control J to jump it to a new level. Control J jumps it to a new level. And then I rotated it by hitting Control T or going to Image or Edit, Transform, and then you can go to rotate. Okay, hold down shift while you rotate and it'll rotate at an angle, a specific angle. And you can also scale. Really what you should do is go to free transform so you can do everything. So then just scale the corners to fit into this area here. I'm trying to match that existing map that we mapped onto the buffet already, so that when we put this texture in, it'll just kind of go right in and we don't have to adjust it much. So I'm trying to make it look similar to that one. Okay, so from there, what I did, well, I adjusted the levels of my wood, first of all. Layer, new adjustment, levels. Kind of into that range, and then layer, new adjustment, hue saturation. I adjusted that as well, kind of into that range. Let's leave that at 0. Okay, so get it about the color that you want, and then you can just collapse this by selecting all of them and hitting Control E. Collapse them all into one layer. But more importantly, we need to make this tileable. It's not tileable right now. It is in this direction, but not in this direction. So what we're going to do is go into our Move tool, take this layer, slide it over while holding down Alt so that it copies. And then hit Control T again, or go up to Free Transform, and then flip it horizontally and hit Enter. Now, this side over here is going to be an exact mirror of that side over there, which is good because then it will tile, but we have a seam now in the center, which is problematic. So what I did this earlier, and I got to here and then copied it over to here and mirrored it. And you can see that mine is actually gotten rid of the seam. So what I did, I can turn it off for you. There was my seam right there, okay? So I overlapped it to there, but then I just created a mask that kind of painted out a lot of those grains so that your eye can't really see the seam anymore. So let me just delete this mask so that I can show you. Okay, so what I did was I took this layer, copied it to here and mirrored it, creates this seam here, but these two sides match. And what we need to do is create a mask by hitting this button here. You can hold down Alt and click on that mask and go into it, and then Alt click to go back out. But what we really want to do, hopefully you have some familiarity with Photoshop and how masks work. What we really want to do is go into black for our color right here. Select a brush that's got some variance to it. So this is just one of the standard default brushes here. And it's got some rough edges, which is perfect. Make it a little bit bigger brush size and zoom in here to this seam, and then make sure we've got our mask selected. Go into our brush tool, which is here, and then just go in and start painting out the layer that's above and letting the bottom one shine through in a way that is broken up enough that it looks, you no longer see that harsh line there and your eye can no longer catch the seam going on in our texture. Okay, so here you see a seam, but these grains kind of line up. So if you just kind of fade one into the other, your eye will no longer see a seam there. So that's looking good. This should maybe come all the way over like that. Okay, now the only thing you need to avoid here and be careful about is to just kind of muddy up all this nice high resolution grain in here so that you can't see it anymore and it's not reading anymore. So if you edit it too much, you could get that going on. But really what we're doing is breaking this line, kind of like camouflage. You know how camouflage breaks up the solid lines so that your eye doesn't catch it and it just blends in with its surroundings? It's exactly what we're trying to do here. Fortunately, with wood grain, it's pretty forgiving and we can pretty easily do it. So just meticulously go through and do that. Our mask is looking like this. If we alt click on it, it looks like that. Doesn't look like much, but if we zoom out, you can see down here, there's no longer a seam there. So I'm going to quickly do this, go through and paint out the seam. Okay, now with the seam painted out, let's go ahead and trim this off here. Just use your rectangle tool and then do image crop. Okay, now we can use the tool to copy all layers below and jump to a new layer. That is Control-Alt-Shift-E. Control-Alt-Shift-E. That takes all these layers, combines them into one, and jumps them to a new layer up here. Okay, so once we have that, we can now test out the tileability of it, and the best way to do that is to use the filter other offset. And this is just offsetting pixels. So if you offset it horizontally -3000, okay, right there, you're not seeing a lot of seams. What you do see is some mirrored stuff that looks funky. So we'll go back and fix that. Vertically everything looks fine because everything's broken into these segments. So when it tiles, it looks fine. Now here's some of that mirrored stuff that obviously looks like a mirror, and we don't want that so much. So what we can do is go in and clean up that. This area right here looks funky. Okay, so what most people would want to do here is use the clone tool and just start cloning different parts of the wood in order to get the look you want. The clone tool is right here, and what it does is you select one area and paint in another, and it's actually grabbing from that first area over here. The only problem with that is it will start to muddy up your nice grain texture like I was talking about, and I don't like that. So a cleaner way to do it is to just grab chunks of wood from other parts of your texture. Just select it with the rectangle tool and hit Control-J to jump it to a new level. And then if you use the move tool or hit V, then you can move that. So what I would do is move that over like right there, maybe even a little further. You can use the arrow keys to nudge it into place. Right there you can line up those grains. So then again, just go in and paint out and try to make these grains kind of match up, these wood grains. Okay, I think that actually looks fine right there. Maybe a little more adjustment. Seems to be a line right there we don't want. Okay, now if you looked at that closely, it would probably look funky. But what it does is it breaks up that weird mirror material there. And maybe now we're getting too repetitive of this over here, but you get the idea. We can go through like this right here and this right here really stand out as obvious mirrored objects, and they should be pretty easy to fix using the same techniques. Make sure to go back to the full layer here, and let's grab a chunk of wood like right there, something that doesn't have a distinctive mark on it, and we can just again jump it to a new layer and then cover up some of this over here and create a mask for it, and then just kind of paint out some of the parts we don't want. Try to avoid those really distinctive marks just repeating themselves in an obvious mirror-like fashion. Okay, something like that. All right, so you could go through and keep cleaning this up. I think these two planks look really bad right here, so we don't want that. In fact, might be better to just take a whole nother plank and put it over that one. Maybe this one. And I say planks, they're not really planks, but jump that whole thing to a new layer, bring it up here, and these two are obvious repeats of each other, so let's replace one of them. And maybe just nudge it into place and Control-T again and flip it. Okay, now that's a unique board there. I think overall this board you're not really seeing a lot of those weird textures anymore. You could go through and continue to clean it up a little bit. So I will do that, but that's the basic way to get the diffuse map tileable and a good start and a good base for what we need for the rest of our maps.